Alright, this is video lesson 3 for chapter 5, and this part of the lesson is going to be going over the species richness and species evenness. We're also going to be learning about why measuring these things is very important in science, and also what the Shannon index is, which is pretty much that lab that we did last week. So, chapter 5, video 3. So species richness is defined as the number of species in a given area, okay? And so this is actually a quantitative measurement. So if you were to look at a community, let's say you saw this community, this is community A, species richness would be the number of different species here, right? So it looks like we've got like a pinkish reddish species. We have a pinkish reddish species with a black circle around it. We have a green one, we have a yellow one, and we have a purple one. So I think that's 5 different species. So this means that there's 5 different species present, and that's the number of different species in a given area. And generally, scientists would then count the number of each of those, and then they would relate those numbers to each other, okay? And when they relate those numbers to each other, like the amount of purples compared to the amount of pinks, they look at the proportion of those to each other. And that is called species evenness. So this is the relative abundance of a species in an ecosystem or an area of study. Again, it's the relative proportion of individuals within different species. That is species evenness. So how even is it? So are there equal amounts of these species? So if there's 5 yellow species, does that mean that all the other ones have 5? If all the other ones were 5 each as well, this community, community A, would have a high species evenness. Okay. Now, in class, we not only looked at the number of species, for example, in the parking lot, we also looked at the evenness. So we looked at the relative number of SUVs and sedans and all that. And we used those numbers to quantify what we would call the Shannon index. The Shannon index, if you remember, is a mathematical formula that includes a little bit of calculus, where you take the measurements of richness and evenness and you throw them into this formula where you take the natural log of it and that kind of thing. So this is a math formula that we use to incorporate the numbers of richness and evenness. And generally, if the H number value is higher, that means that it is more biodiverse. That's Zoe's finger.
Hi, if you can see me.
So and generally what we find is that if richness is high and evenness is high, then the Shannon index is high. Okay? There are drawbacks to this as well. And so it's important for students to really understand and
There's Scarlet.
We have lots of species diversity here.
Hey, that's mean.
So I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
I love Target.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, yeah. So what do they do with this data? Well, why do scientists actually do this? Well, they actually collect this information, you guys, so that they can have like a standard to compare to. So this is really important for baseline data. These measurements provide scientists with that data so that they can measure the impact of, let's say, a natural disaster after something happens, or maybe some anthropogenic influence. So like the development of South Park Mall, where that stands, it used to be forest and ponds and wetlands, and there was a creek in there. And so you know, they should have data from before that development, and then they can compare it to what they have today. So again, these are measurements. This is a way to quantify biodiversity. A way to quantify biodiversity and using that data to help figure out impact of anything. Impact could be from habitat destruction, impact from invasive species, from pollution, from climate change, or over exploitation or over harvesting. So all of these measurements can be used in many different ways. Okay, and that's it.